They've abdicated their responsibility. They have walked away from their oaths of office to uphold the Constitution. They apparently believe in or are cool with the all powerful executive branch, and I'm not. And because it's not constitutional, it's not proper, and it's certainly not serving Americans. So Tom Cole has to go because he has let this happen. And I don't know how enthusiastic he is about it, but I don't care. If you're standing by and let it happen, I don't care if you're a true believer or if you're just a pragmatist. If he's a pragmatist, I actually have less respect for someone who's a pragmatist who let this happen. If at least you're a true believer.
My next guest is a candidate for the United States House of Representatives, running to represent the people of Oklahoma's 4th Congressional District. He's a retired U.S. Air Force colonel, a combat-tested F-16 fighter pilot, a husband, a father, and a first-time candidate who spent more than 3 decades serving this nation with distinction. Jeff Pixley was born in Corona, California to 2 Air Force veterans and grew up with a deep respect for service and discipline. At 17 years old, he enlisted in the Air Force, and that oath of service has never left him. He went on to commission as a second lieutenant through the Air Force ROTC program at the University of Oklahoma, and what followed was one of the most decorated and varied military careers you'll ever hear about. Over 30 years, Jeff flew combat missions in Operation Southern Watch and Operation Iraqi Freedom as an F-16 fighter pilot. He trained the next generation of fighter pilots as an instructor and evaluator. He served as an Air Force One advanced agent supporting the White House Military Office. He coordinated defense operations across Central and South America and the Arctic. He earned a master's degree in National Security Resource Strategy from the prestigious Eisenhower School at the National Defense University, and he commanded all of Air Force basic military training at Joint Base San Antonio, Lackland, overseeing the reception, training, and development of more than 60,000 new airmen, and played a key role in the creation of the Space Force basic training. He returned to Oklahoma to lead officer training at the University of Oklahoma as commander of the AFROTC Detachment 675, preparing the next generation of Air Force and Space Force leaders. None of this, which I love, thank you, Jeff, none of this was possible without the resilience of his wife, Andrea, his high school sweetheart, and their 3 adult children who endured 14 relocations, overseas assignments, long separations during combat deployments, and remote tours. Jeff Pixley is running for Congress because the oath he took at 17 years old demands it. So welcome to the show, Jeff. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on, and this opportunity to reach out to folks across the world. These are really important conversations that you're having, and I'm just really grateful to be part of it.
Well, thank you. I can't remember where. I think I saw your content on social, on Threads maybe, and I was like, hey, you should come be on the. I really appreciate anybody who's willing to do something right now. And, I'll be honest, I really appreciate older white men who have experience in this, who are willing to, do the right thing, because we're really lacking in that right now. It's like bizarro world. Everything is upside down. I don't understand any of it, to be honest, and I'm the daughter of a military family, 2-time Vietnam vet, and I really don't understand a lot of things right now. So you took your oath at 17 years old. I mean, that's wild, right? I left home at 17, but that's slightly different. You were up ahead, a much bigger challenge than I was. But what was that oath that got you to this moment? Because that's part of your shtick, is like, your oath demanded it. So what does that mean for you?
So before I answer that part, I want to acknowledge something you said in the intro. By the way, very kind. It makes me feel really old to hear all that laid out in chronological order. But I was raised by a family, my mom and dad specifically, but more broadly, their parents' generation, who were the World War II generation, where service to the country was really important to them. In fact, the house I grew up in was not unlike this office I'm sitting in now. I've kind of built a shrine to my service. I grew up in a shrine to their service, and that implanted in me the idea that service to the country was something that was not just something that would earn you praise or high fives. It was something that there was something to be proud of individually, specifically based on sacrifice. So when I was very young, I knew I'd serve in the military. And then when I was, I think maybe 10 years old, it's hard to pin down, but at some point I saw my first fighter airplane fly by, and I'm like, wow, that's something I want to do. And my parents being great parents are like, well, if you want to do it, you can do it. And so they planted that seed in my mind. And I spent my whole youth preparing myself to go be a fighter pilot. And when people ask, my friends what they want to do, I want to be a fireman, I want to be a doctor, whatever. I always said I want to be a fighter pilot. And when I took that oath at 17 years old, it was a diversion from the game plan, because when I enlisted in the Air Force, I wasn't going to go to fly fighters, because you have to be an officer to fly fighters. But it turned out when I was about to graduate high school at 17, I wasn't ready for college. Academically, I wasn't ready. Looking back, I don't think I was mature enough to go to college and be successful. And probably just as importantly, I was in a financial position to go to college. I grew up, pretty modest means. My parents couldn't afford to pay for college. So I enlisted as this way to go serve, with the ultimate goal of flying fighters still on there. But it wasn't until years later that opportunity that popped up. And we can talk about more if you want how that worked out, and the women in my life that actually made that possible. But when I took the oath of office at this place called MEPS, the Military Entrance Processing Station, this kind of assembly line of new people in the military down in San Diego, I've written about this, and I'm kind of ashamed to admit this, but when I was standing in that room after the day of medical testing and all the stuff that gets you ready to take the oath, they pulled us into this room with flags and mahogany paneling, and some very fancy looking a Navy lieutenant walks in, who I thought was some kind of, this amazing person, just, junior officer, it turns out. And he said to this room full of us that all spent the day in our underwear together, said, "Raise your right hand and repeat after me." And he literally could have said anything and I would have repeated after him. And that's because I knew that was the next step in the process of becoming an airman. And so we went through that process. They swore us in, and then I went back and finished high school over the next few months, and then I went to basic training. So it wasn't until later that I looked back and reflected on what that oath means. And I won't recite it to y'all. You can Google it. But ultimately, what you're saying when you take an oath to enlist in the military or to become an officer in the military, you're making a promise to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And that oath ends with the words, "So help me God," not until further notice. And what I've seen in some people out there is they're treating the end of that as the "until further notice," or in, terms and conditions apply. When I took my oath, terms and conditions don't apply. I promised I would do it. And years later, when we'll talk about my decision to run, it was entirely about that oath of office that drove me to make the decision to leave the Air Force ahead of my planned timeline to run for office, because the oath of office demanded I do it.
I mean, that's incredible, because, a lot of us are looking around and just trying to understand how do we get here. But we're also seeing big military guys. I don't know his name, but somebody else stepped down yesterday, like the head of that's a big, you don't do that in the middle of a war, right? So it's, a lot of people are really like, this is it, that had to be a tough decision, right? Because, as an adult, you understand that things aren't black and white, right? And so leaving earlier, that meant you gave up some benefits, you gave up some retirement stuff, you made a sacrifice to go do this thing. And I think that's really commendable, because that's what it's going to take. You know what I mean? We're all going to have to sacrifice. I don't want to say bleed a little, because I don't want that to be a literal thing, but we're all going to have to sacrifice a little for this thing to turn itself around, or for us to turn it around.
Absolutely. And I wouldn't say the decision was hard. I did take that into account, though. I asked myself, what does this mean for my family? Because, despite having all those years of service and being a pilot, I've never been interested in flying for the airlines or doing any flying on the outside. It's just not my style. Like flying upside down and pulling G's. So flying for Delta was never going to happen.
Yeah, they don't like that there.
They hate that. So I knew that when I retired, my game plan was to live on my retirement. That's one of the reasons we focused on Oklahoma. It's very affordable to live here. It's a great state. I went to college here. The people are great. And I knew I could live on my retirement. So, and it's, the leaving a year earlier than I planned, the math is it's going to cost me about $300 a month for the rest of my life, that's not huge money, but that's it's not insignificant money. But that was not a factor. I thought of it, but it wasn't a factor in my decision. What was a factor in my decision was, how can I look myself in the mirror for the rest of my life if I don't take advantage of this opportunity? So I'll briefly talk about that moment, because it was just over a year ago. I was my job was, as you read my bio, I was the commander of Air Force ROTC at University of Oklahoma, which is where I had been a cadet back in the 90s. And that job, for those who don't know it, is where officers later in their career come and teach college students to prepare them to be leaders in the military, and teach the core values, teach the mission, what we're capable of doing. We vet them and screen them and do all those things to prepare them to be leaders of character in a really difficult and dangerous world. And that job included me literally teaching classes on the Constitution, teaching classes on the oath of office and what it means, teaching classes about what happens if you receive an unlawful order. That was part of the curriculum I was teaching. And a year ago, February 22nd, is to be specific, I woke up one Saturday morning and read the news that overnight the president had fired the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He had fired the admiral that ran the Navy. And to me, most alarmingly, like the bells were ringing, he fired the lawyers on top of all the branches. And when I read that, I knew I was at a personal inflection point, because firing the lawyers signaled to me that illegal orders might be coming, that improper orders might be coming, that there was that somewhere in the administration, they didn't want lawyers interfering with the policy agenda coming down. And I realized that although I hadn't received any illegal orders at that point, and I was training, it's not like I was going to be out there doing combat missions. Those days were behind me, but being part of it and being a contributor to something that I feared would not be in line with my values and the Air Force core values that had been living since I was, a teenager. It was something I couldn't live with. So I happened to be in a good spot timing wise. I was allowed to retire. I was eligible to retire. The only real, big controversy was I was only less than halfway through a 3-year assignment. So I'd be leaving that early, and I had to call my boss in San Antonio that Monday morning and say, "Boss, sorry to break this to you, but I'm leaving a year early, and you can't tell me no," because I was eligible. I had all the cards, and that meant they'd have to find some colonel who wanted to come here. Good news is it's a great job, easy to fill. The bad news is it meant I had to leave those cadets behind, and some people have actually asked me on the campaign trail, well, if you leave, aren't you abandoning ship? Aren't you leaving it in the hands, of the bad folks? And don't we need good people to stick around? And there's some value in that. And honestly, in the first Trump administration, I went through that. I was eligible to retire back then too, and I didn't, because what I saw during that administration was there were still structures and leadership in place to dampen the effects down low. And never during the first administration, although I wasn't a fan, I wasn't political, because you're not political when you're on active duty. I wasn't a fan, but day to day, it was frustrating, but not something that was a deal breaker for me. This was different. So when I made the decision to leave, and leaving in the hands of the cadets behind me, or the people who would replace me to teach those cadets, I have full faith that they can do that. But I had spent my year and a half in that job looking cadets in the eye and telling them things that now I didn't believe were true anymore. And I really had no choice. So the departure was a no-brainer. I had to retire. The question about what I would do next didn't come until a little bit later, because when can I retire? What's the soonest I can get out, is the question I was asking myself, because I needed to get away as fast as possible to avoid being complicit. And it turned out that was going to be the summer of 2025. And I'm like, well, wait a second. If I leave in 2025, that means I can be an active part of the 2026 election cycle. I can be political for the first time. I can weigh in. I can go to meetings. I can campaign for folks. I can door knock. All those things that you can't do as a military member overtly were now on the table. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to help some Dems get elected here in Oklahoma. And I live in a town called Norman, which is the college town, very well represented. My state representative is a good Dem. My state senator is a good Dem. And I went up the chain, like, okay, who needs my help? Okay, who's going to beat Tom Cole, who's been in Congress since 2003? Who's going to run against him, and how do I help them win? So I did a little bit of Google, and I see that the person that we've nominated the last 4 cycles is someone who's not a serious candidate, a good person, a good, nice Dem, but not a serious candidate, more along the lines of, and maybe we'll talk about this later, about Oklahoma's politics. but a name on the ballot with the D next to the name, that's all they were for 4 cycles in a row. So I realized that me putting my weight behind that would do nothing. So I asked a couple of friends, I'm like, am I crazy for thinking maybe I should run for office? And they said, yeah, you're crazy, but you should totally do it. That's why I'm running, because what's happening right now in DC, and the first 20 minutes here, I've been talking about the president, secretary of defense, and what they've been up to. I'm not running for president or secretary of defense, but Congressman Cole and our federal officers, the 2 senators, well, one senator now, since we have a fill-in right now with Markwayne Mullen's departure, are standing by and letting this happen. They've abdicated their responsibility. They have walked away from their oaths of office to uphold the Constitution. They apparently believe in or are cool with the all-powerful executive branch, and I'm not. And because it's not constitutional, it's not proper, and it's certainly not serving Americans. So Tom Cole has to go because he has let this happen. And I don't know how enthusiastic he is about it, but I don't care. If you're standing by and let it happen, I don't care if you're a true believer or if you're just a pragmatist. If he's a pragmatist, I actually have less respect for someone who's a pragmatist who let this happen. If at least you're a true believer, you have a condition. There's some kind of condition that explains just being pragmatic and preserving your job, or you don't want to take the heat from people in your district, or you fear the MAGA backlash, then shame on you. I'm not about that. And it's actually, you mentioned how hard it is to run. The hardest part about running is probably, not practically speaking, not campaign wise, but like psychologically, the hardest thing about running is knowing that when I win the primary in June and the Republicans come after me, and Tom Cole comes after me, and he will, because he's never faced a real threat, at least not in more than a decade. They're going to come after me hard, and what I will have traded is that bio you read about me. If you leave out the part about me running for office and take that bio and leaflet drop it across the state of Oklahoma, most people would be like, "This is a stand-up guy. I like this guy. This is a guy who wants to be my neighbor. I want to have a beer with him." The minute you put the letter D after my name, half of this state auto hates me. The hardest part about this is knowing that reputation I built of service in the country, to the country, is diminished because of the toxicity of our politics, which is it's unfortunate. Now, that's not dissuading me, of course. It's just something I'll have to overcome, and I think I'll overcome that by just engaging with people, being myself, and trying to appeal to them as human beings with eyeball contact, and being in a room with someone, and not letting social media be the deliverer of my message. Although I'm trying to be active on social media, I'm not going to break through to a single Republican with a clever Threads post. It's going to be stuff like this. It's going to be on their doorsteps, and I'm convinced, though, that the solution to our democracy in places like Oklahoma, which is a great example of how very split we are, how big the divide is. If I can make headway here, it can be done anywhere. And that's a recipe for healing our country, not just for Dem victories. I want Dem victories, honestly, but this isn't only about that. I would be happy. I'd be cool with a Republican-led Congress if they were taking care of all their constituents and acting in good faith and thinking about the needs of the country first, not preserving their party power structure. I could live with that, and we don't have that right now. And also, I'll tell you right now that if the Dems win in a blue tsunami that I'm hoping to be a part of, and we start acting like Republicans and dunking on the R's back home and saying, well, now it's our chance to be the assholes, then we're no better than them. I'm not going to be a part of that.
Agreed. Well, I'm a principle over circumstance kind of a gal, which is wildly inconvenient, and I can tell that you are too. I really wish I wasn't sometimes, you know what I mean? Life would be a little easier if I could just keep my head in the sand, but I'm just not built that way, It's why I started this podcast. It might not move mountains, but I can't live with myself just being quiet. I'm not built that. It's not about anything else or who's receiving anything that I'm putting in the universe. It's about where I am, as a person. And so I appreciate that about you. because it really does matter. And I think that'll resonate with people. And I also really appreciate your honesty about like your vulnerability. Like, yeah, they are going to come for you. They're going to attack you. And let me tell you, it is not fun, man. It is not. Your nervous system gets deregulated. You want to argue with those people. I mean, it hurts, especially if you're an empathetic, sensitive person. Like, I'm a little rough around the edges, but it's just because I'm a big old softy inside and hella sensitive to everything. And so it's not easy to be a public figure at all or go viral or anything because they come for you. But what I have learned, Jeff, is that the meanest, crappiest 1% are the loudest, but then there's like 80% of people who will agree with you but will never say anything. Right. So it's still so important to get that message out because it empowers other people. And this is what we're waiting for, right? Like we keep talking about like nobody's coming to save you, but I'll be honest, when I read your stuff, I'm like, well, maybe Jeff, maybe Jeff is coming to save us a little bit, because it's like, where's the adult in the room? You know what I mean? Like you've studied this is what we need. And I would imagine that Democrat or Republican, that message is going to resonate with people in Oklahoma if you can get it to them. Right. That this is about the Constitution. This isn't about political parties. This is about the Constitution and the oath that I took. I really love that. I think it really matters. What in the 4th district of Oklahoma where you're running, what are some of the biggest issues that are presenting there locally that you think will resonate with voters?
It's really no different than the rest of the country right now. The affordability crisis that's across the country is real here as well. We may be, slightly protected from it because it's affordable to live here, but for a guy like me with a pension, it's very affordable. Because that pension would be true no matter where I live. So if I pick somewhere affordable to live, that pretty generous pension helps me. But minimum wage in Oklahoma is still $7.25 an hour, has been since 2009. So when inflation goes up at the pace it has been, or things like the tariffs are dropped on them, or housing costs, insurance costs are a big deal here. I mentioned weather earlier when we were doing our intro. It's expensive to live here in Oklahoma, and like everywhere in the country, it's really expensive to be poor, and that's no different here. And when we tackle problems that matter to them here, my number one platform item is, and I tell this all the time, and that it's not sexy. It says restore constitutional balance, and it speaks back to the imbalance at the federal level, where the president has all the power and the Congress has become a vestigial organ, and the Supreme Court is either an arm of the executive or just complicit in letting nonsense happen. And the reason I place that first, even though affordability is the number one concern of the day-to-day folks in Oklahoma, if I walk down the street in Norman and say, what's your biggest problem? They're not going to say the constitutional imbalance, of course, Jeff. But the reason I put that first is if we don't fix that, we can't fix the other problems, because we have right now what amounts to a patronage economy, which means if you want something done, you want your business to succeed, you want regulation to help your business, it's not about having a solid argument, that's for the public good. It's about showing up to DC with a briefcase full of money, or getting on the right news channel and saying the right words to glaze a certain person, and you're going to get what you want. So if we don't fix that structure that makes that the system, I can't fix affordability, because we'll have no leverage in that system. So affordability is the number one thing here in Oklahoma, and it goes across all types of people. This district Oklahoma is a little bit gerrymandered. It's not crazy. It's not the worst state for gerrymandering, but it's a healthy mix, is what I say, of suburban and rural. So there are farmers, ranchers, and cattle producers here in Oklahoma. The affordability crisis looks slightly different to them than it does to a family in South Oklahoma City, when it's about rent prices going up. The schools not preparing kids to be active members of our economy. Down in the southern part of my district, with the tariffs and the what's happening in Iran right now, affecting fertilizer prices, making it harder for people who spent their whole lives and built their generationally built their lives around agriculture, are being crushed right now. And it's really important for us not to forget that. And I'd be terrible at my job as a politician, and certainly as a member of Congress, if I didn't recognize that they're impacted too. It's just different than what I feel as kind of a city guy.
Right, right. Yeah, I've driven through Oklahoma a few times driving across the country, and there's a lot of farms. There's a lot of farmland. It's a beautiful state, especially after driving through the other couple before that. You know what I mean? It's a nice break in scenery, but it's a lot of farmland, and that's a different situation. I kind of have an off-topic question for you. I know cannabis has gotten really big in Oklahoma over the last few years and has driven a lot of money and tax revenue, I would imagine. And then I think, was that in jeopardy recently? Is that relative to you at all, about like the government interference and saying you can do it, you can't do it, you can do it, you can't do it, and the impact that has? Or is that
Actually, interestingly, the threat against it. So it's been medical marijuana has been legal in Oklahoma for a few years. The people did that through a vote. It is a booming industry. If you are in any city in Oklahoma, you'll see dispensaries everywhere, and it's definitely bringing tax revenue. It's bringing relief to those who need cannabis for medical purposes. The biggest threat is not actually the federal government. That I figured it might be, but it turns out that our governor, who's on his way out the door earlier this year in his final State of the State speech, wants to undo it. He's pointing at corruption and criminal enterprise interfering with it, and so he wants to take it away and undo the will of the voters, which is a theme here in Oklahoma. And I'm not running for state office, but my representatives and senators up in the Capitol need to push back hard on that, because the Republican supermajority in Oklahoma state government seems to have decided that the will of the people is not what they're interested in supporting, and they've made it harder for for ballot initiatives to be placed on the ballot. They've created a really difficult system petition count. Used to be a certain number of signatures is all you need to meet the threshold to get on the ballot. Now we have a system that's being challenged in court, but the system they've implemented is, well, you can only have so many signatures from each area, which means you have to convince people in the outlying counties where they're less affected or maybe opposed to something. You have to include them in that too, which is a really dumb, I think, a bastardization of democracy, because they're going to get a chance to weigh in on the vote. Telling them that you have to have their signature ahead of time basically makes you have to vote for it twice. So it is off topic, but it's an important issue here. It's an important issue not just for veterans, but for everybody here in Oklahoma and for business. And I've met a single business owner in Oklahoma who's hoping that industry goes away. And I know that the visitors to Oklahoma, especially from places like Texas, don't want it to go away, because the border crossings for those day passes, the short-term prescriptions is a real business model.
Well, exactly. Well, and that's the thing, right? And so it's less about the cannabis, which I'm an advocate of, and just more about like that government interference or the state leader like deciding to ignore the will of the people, right? It's like this overarching theme of all of this, right? Like we say we want something, and then the people we put in charge to make it happen rarely do it, right? I feel like that's what we're seeing across the board in so many places. And I just happen to know a little bit about like manufacturing cannabis, and I know that aside from the dispensaries out in those rural areas, a lot of those farms turned into cannabis farms, and Oklahoma is supplying a lot of the country's cannabis, which a lot of people don't know. So it's a big issue from, listen to the people, listen to what they want. And then it comes down to affordability, right? If they're creating jobs, like if there's corruption, fix it. Of course there's corruption. There's corruption in everything. There's corruption in the church. What are we, children? Come on.
Right.
There's corruption. Show me a police force anywhere in the world that's not corrupted. I don't want to talk about that. Like, then fix it. You know what I mean? Fix it. Don't get away with it.
It makes me suspicious, honestly, that, perhaps that speech by the governor is not really about undoing it, but it creates the fight, it creates the division, it animates donors and advocates, and we haven't talked about this yet, but a really important thing that we need to address when I get to Washington is we need to take money out of politics, and that, at the federal level, we have to overturn Citizens United. But it seems to me, and I'm no expert yet, I've only been in politics for 8 months, but I think, like many things in American life now, the question isn't necessarily is this a good thing or a bad thing, or judging something on the merits. The first like the smartest question to ask to like get to the root of what's going on is to ask who benefits from this financially. Ask that first, and that simplifies the rest of the exploration of the topic. And if you do that last, you're going to go down a bunch of rabbit holes that lead you nowhere. So maybe this is just a way of unsealing some political campaign contributions and stirring up controversy because they know that generates news cycles. But I hope it doesn't get undone here in Oklahoma. I think that'd be a problem. It would definitely be a problem for people I know personally that would be adversely affected by that. And we haven't talked about the opioid crisis is a real thing in Oklahoma too, and there's plenty of evidence that the opioid addiction is curbed by access to medical cannabis.
For sure, because people just want relief. Right? People just want relief. And some people want a release, right? And like, I always say, even in the jungle, monkeys will let like different fruits fall to the ground and ferment, and they will protect them until they fermented to a certain point, and then all the monkeys will eat it and get drunk. And I'm like, look, even in the animal kingdom, sometimes people need to let off some steam.
Right. Well,
let them have
for people like the governor to rail against medical marijuana while the alcohol is for sale if you're over 21. So in fact, I grew up in a pretty conservative household, and my beliefs about marijuana use were guided by that. I was in college before I had a conversation with a person who was actually an advocate. He's actually my best friend today now, all these years later, who changed my mind, and he used the comparison with alcohol argument on me. And I'm like, God, you're right. This is completely hypocritical. How could I? In fact, this is a side note you'll probably edit out of the show, but at the time, we had that argument. He made the argument that if you're against marijuana, you should be against alcohol. And I decided to win that argument by stopping drinking alcohol. And years later, I'm like, that was a dumb approach. Why not just concede the point? That's maybe the stubbornness in me.
You got to see it all the way through.
Right. I'm no longer a teetotaler, for the record, but for years, to win that argument, I stopped drinking like a dummy.
Principle over circumstance, man. Yeah, you're all in on it, Jeff. I love it. Well, let's talk about money in politics, right? Because I think that is a really big thing right now. Things like AIPAC, the United States is waking up to like, wait a minute, who are these people and why are they controlling so much? I think most of us didn't know. I'm a DC girl. I lived in DC for 20 years, and I understood lobbying and stuff, but I wasn't paying that much attention. I didn't fully understand, and I think a lot of people are like, wait, really learning about all of this. And I think that while there are very few politicians that don't accept money from AIPAC right now, I think the next version of our United States government is going to be candidates that run on not taking money from AIPAC.
I agree completely. It is my experience over the last 8 months is the new litmus test on the left. Uh-huh. It's certainly the litmus test among young people. I am never not asked about that by people under 40. And I know it's working. They're scared. That lobby is, I wouldn't say they're running scared, but I know they see the writing on the wall. And I've read some recent news reports about some new AIPAC-like or AIPAC affiliated organization standing up, literally changing the name to obscure that, so someone can look in the camera and say, I will never take AIPAC money, but they're going to take money from an organization called Friends of those. I don't know. I don't want to make up a name and offend someone. Puppies are cute pack, right? And it's one of the same people. So I think the answer to this is get all big money out of politics, all corporate money out of politics, and you don't have to. AIPAC gets a lot of attention right now because of what's happening in Iran and the apparent the dominance apparent in our politics, but I think categorically, I think it's improper for foreign influence PACs to influence our politics. Nobody should be taken. I don't care what country someone is advocating for, and if it's not for the United States of America, the people of the United States of America, and the people of my district, it may not be corrupted. And that's the thing. I was talking to someone, I can't remember who it was now, but they said, and they purported to be an expert, and they're like, what do you mean you're not taking corporate money? You're a fool. You'll never get enough money if you don't take corporate money. They said all you have to do is just when you take it, just have an ironclad agreement that your votes will never be swayed by that money. And I said to him that doesn't make any sense, because I would never let it sway my vote anyway. That's not the question. My integrity is my integrity, and I would never let someone's donation sway my vote, whether it's from an individual or from a corporation. The problem is, if my constituents wonder, even for a moment, where my loyalties lie and whether I'm voting based on someone's donation or voting because their campaign contribution is going to get me reelected, I've lost. I can't look them in the eye on equal footing if they believe that even for a second. So the only antidote to that is to refuse it all. And if that means that it's harder to fundraise, then okay, it's harder to fundraise. But there are people out there, Bernie Sanders and other folks who have done a great job of collecting money from around the country. The hard part is, and this is maybe this is the key to this whole conversation, is the barriers to entry for politics are massive. Not just the psychological barriers that we talked about before, about like being ready to be attacked and having your everything scrutinized and being in a fishbowl. The financial barriers are real, and I think there are folks out there that realize that getting a candidate off the ground can literally happen with a single check or one single an ad. And that easy button has filled our Congress with people who maybe later on, and when they get some momentum, they don't need that money anymore. But it's always there. And if your origin story is the giant PAC money, then I'm always going to question your judgment. So this is why I think podcasts like this, social media, are so important. The game changer for us, and I'm still doing the old school fundraising. I sit at this chair and dial for dollars from a list of people, and I talk to people's voicemails every day and get almost no callbacks, but occasionally I get one that pays off. But most of my fundraising has come from friends and family, people I meet on the street, and social media. The future of fundraising, I believe, is things like this, where some clip, some moment in this interview, I come off as especially clever, and you clip it and it goes out there, and then suddenly there's people in Sheboygan who are like, "Who's this guy? I'll give him $10." That's the future of it. And I believed this for a long time, even before I was in politics, that was the answer to overturning Citizens United, was make it unnecessary by doing broad fundraising through social media. I can, if my 27-year-old daughter can make a video on TikTok and have 1 million views overnight, that means that there's no barrier between me and my message and all those people out there. So I was ready to take advantage of that and be clever and use TikTok and Threads and this to get out there. But here's what I'm learning now, and maybe you're hearing this from other folks, is there are platforms out there that purport to be a way for us all to have our voice out there, but they're very quick to throttle. And I'll use an example. I don't know if this will get me in trouble with anyone, but Threads was where I was fastest growing, and I got to about 2,000 followers on Threads, which I know is not much, but for a guy like me, it was a lot. And then one day my account was disabled. I hadn't posted anything controversial. They just shut my account down. No explanation and no appeal. The appeal was immediately denied. No explanation. So I started again from scratch, and I've grown it back by being careful what I post, as I always am. And I'm watching not just me, but other folks like me out there who will have thousands of followers and get almost no engagement. It is clear to me that there are media companies out there, social media companies, have cracked the code, and the political apparatus that benefits from money being the most important ingredient in politics, not character, not competence, not policy, but money. They've figured out that it is a threat to their system to allow a candidate like me to go viral, or to have sudden, 10,000 people a day come to my Threads and give me $5. That's a threat to the system, so they are shutting it down. And 100%. Someone might accuse me of rationalizing a lack of popularity. Maybe that's true. I don't know. Maybe I'm delusional. But everybody I talk to online is like, hell yeah. And the people that I meet want to give me, $5. Like, heck yeah. I get those small donor contributions from people who I can reach, but man, it is hard to reach those people, which is crazy because, like I said, if my 27-year-old does a funny dance tomorrow, it'll have 10 million views tomorrow. Now, I know some of those are bots and some of that's artificial, but I know we can do this. And I fear that social media companies are going to continue to clamp down, especially on those who have the biggest chance to upset the system. That may not be me, but you have to have a breakthrough to get attention now, and I don't know where that comes from. Maybe it's this podcast. This will be my breakthrough moment. I'll thank you.
You never know. I'll make you famous. Well, I mean, listen, it's definitely real. They throttle me all the time whenever I get too close to the sun. Like, I get banned on Facebook all the time. Like, it's a thing. You know what I mean? It's a thing, and then I get my account back, and then I'm like, because you're right. That's exactly what they're doing. It's not a lack of popularity. In fact, at one point I was like shadow banned, and I actually proved it by like tagging myself and then looking and I couldn't find anything. And then I finally, I've got 70,000 followers, Jeff, like through my whole platform, and I don't get that much traction. I don't get, I have 20,000 on one account and like no one ever sees anything. So it's all a big game, right? But it can happen. If you look at like Becerra right now, the guy in California, like he's having a day right now. Mm-hmm. Like we picked him up on Threads, and a bunch of people took it upon themselves to become his champion. And then he hired the team that was doing Newsom's social media, so his graphics are much better. Now, obviously, that takes some money, you know what I mean? But, my advice to you would be to latch onto the people on Threads that are getting lots of views and reach out to them and say, like, hey, listen to this podcast. If you resonate with any of this, would you help me? Because what we love is a challenge. Because I know when Becerra went viral, everybody was like, who's his team? He needs help. I'll volunteer. I mean, it was insane how many people were like, this guy has a good message. We can't let the Republicans win. We can't let this, the other guy, the millionaire guy win, right? We got to help him. And people it's this little Becerra army has formed on Threads. And I think he probably didn't even know what was happening. For the first few days.
I think you're right. And I'll do that. And every once in a while, someone will reach out. I've had a couple of interviews with some content creators that I already looked up to that have a great reach and are people that are doing great work out there. And none of them have turned into the huge moment, but it's incremental right now and it's early. I suffer from a kind of combination deal that may be unique to me as a fighter pilot. I have an arrogance that comes from being a fighter pilot and a naivete coming from not being in politics. And I was accused by an expert not that long ago of being an idealist. I was talking about endorsements, and they're like, "You're an idealist," and they meant that as an insult. I'm like, no, I think being an idealist is something I'm proud of, right? So I'm an optimistic guy, an idealist, but I've had unrealistic predictions of fundraising ramping up or viewer count ramping up. It's going to happen, and I'm trying to the only thing I can control is being myself. So I'm not going to do stunts. I'm not going to do the closest to a stunt I can ride a unicycle. I'm trying to figure out a way to ride a unicycle without looking like a clown because I think that might get some attention. But I don't want to have to resort to that. I think my bio, the circumstances we're in, the circumstances that I found myself in is. Everybody I talk to says is compelling. So I want it to happen organically. I'm not going to try to force it. And I know and if I do it right, when it does happen, I'll be proud of how we got there, and it won't be some nonsense. Now, if a Becerra Army type thing rallies around me, I will hand over my social media to people who are better than this speaks. I'm 53 years old, and I had literally no social media 10 months ago, none. I started a Substack when I decided to run, but I didn't do political stuff, and I was just learning how to use Substack. So I'm starting from zero. My 27-year-old is amazing. Actually, she's out there making clever videos, kind of trolling Tom Cole, which is fun to watch her do that. Nice. I welcome those who want to help me to grow in popularity online, and not just because. And this is really important. Sorry, I'm making this longer than you wanted. This is no. I love this conversation. This is really important to me. Yes, I want that reach because it will help with fundraising, right? I can't do this, with no money. But that's not the only reason it matters. I think the other reason it matters is we need to have across this country examples of leaders of integrity, people who are serious about taking care of their communities, who want to be in government for the right reasons. And we need examples that from all parties. And the more people learn about me and other people it adds, this version, right? What you see on the screen, this version of a Democrat, a central, middle of the country, progressive, military white dude, is a version of the universe of politicians that there's probably a gap there. Filling in that gap is going to empower people. It is going to inspire people, want them to become involved. They will see in them, somebody out there will say, well, okay, I didn't like politics, but this version of it I like. And if I'm out there and people see me and they get involved, especially if they're young, what that means is we've improved the game. We've got more people participating honestly in it. And this is maybe the most important part. I need to inspire here in Oklahoma someone to replace me in Congress in a couple sessions, right? I want to win, and I'll probably run again if it doesn't break me, I will run again, because I think 2 terms is enough to save the patient, right? My goal is to save this patient and stop the bleeding. But then I need to retire for real, because I promised Andrea we were going to go hiking. And door knocking does not count. We're going to the Appalachian Trail, and I need to retire. So I want to inspire a generation to follow me, and I think it's my job to be an example of what right politics looks like. Not left, right, but in politics with integrity looks like. And if I can mentor the next generation to follow me, then I can hand it off to them. Kind of the way I did to my cadets in ROTC, like, okay, here you go, take good care of my Air Force. The same thing, hey, take good care of this district so I can be in the rocking chair on my porch enjoying the sunset of my life with competent people with integrity running our government.
Amen. Well, I love that about you. I interviewed Mark Davis yesterday. He's running in Florida, a Democrat in a very red Florida. He's a saucy little...
Very saucy. I watch him on Threads.
Muffin, I know. I love him so much. He was a lot of fun to interview. But he said the same thing. He's like, I'm an angry dad. I want to come in here and fix things and help and then get out so I can just go back to being a dad again. He's even giving up his salary and his health care if he gets elected because he just wants to prove that he's not doing it for that. And I respect that a lot. I don't think everybody should have to do that. But, I like that both of you were saying the same thing. Like, I'm here to help and then to get out, not to fix everything and to stay there and to benefit from it, but to help, to help the country be in a better place. And I think that really matters a lot. And I want to really talk about, the donations, because I think as Democrats, we are just so over the hey, give us $5, give us $5. Especially at the beginning of Trump's term when the beginning of the madness when he would say something crazy or sign an executive order, and then the next day the flood on social media would be give us $5, and it was the worst timing ever. It's make a statement. Don't just say, hey, we got to fight him, give us $5. Make a statement. And so what happened is it turned a lot of people off because people can't afford groceries, they can't afford gas, and then when something happens and we look to our Democratic leaders and they go, $5? And you go, are you freaking kidding me, man? You know what I mean? How about, here's how I feel about it, this is why it's wrong, this is what I'm doing against it, please help me, put a link, not can you give us a donation of $5? And I think it really turned a lot of people off. And so I want to really, and I'm saying this in a lot of episodes, I want to really encourage people to separate that, the feeling of getting those messages from these new candidates, because that $5 does matter for you. It matters for Mark. It matters for Paige Loud in Maine. It matters for everybody who's running. And we have to kind of put aside that disdain for politicians asking us for money, especially when we know how much money is in politics, right? And understand that in order to get the money out, we kind of have to fund the next guys coming in.
Right.
And that's just the reality of it.
Yeah, I agree. And, people may not realize this. I certainly didn't. So I can only speak from my own experience. But I had the impression before that if I was giving money to the DNC or DCCC, that they were distributing that out to the people out there that I want to see elected. And there's some of that, but maybe it doesn't shock anybody that's watching this, but the DNC hasn't called me. The DCCC hasn't called me. And I predict, even after I win the primary in June, I predict I will get little or zero support from the DCCC because they view this as an unwinnable fight. which is a nonsense, bullshit, self-fulfilling prophecy thing that we keep falling for. Maybe we'll talk about winnability in a minute. I'm not going to get anything from them at all. So, and I'm not saying to your viewers, don't give to the DCCC. Just don't think that if you give to them, you're giving to me. The only way candidates like me get money is if you go to our website or our campaign website and click on the button that says donate to Jeff. That's the only way I'm going to get money unless I knock on your door and you hand me a check. And I don't want to poo-poo them, but I think the world of them deciding who gets funded is one that we've seen the results of that. We've seen the results of that, and what that means is the rich get richer. They anoint campaigns as being competitive, and they support those. And I love James Tallarico, and I want him desperately to win. I desperately want him to win in Texas. Texas needs James Tallarico in the Senate. That dude raised $27 million in Q1. $27 million in Q1. But I'll bet you anything he is getting money from the DNC or DNC associated fundraising, because they're like, we got to win this race. And every penny that goes to him is a penny that doesn't go to a guy like Mark Davis, doesn't go to me, doesn't go to someone else. Right. So I encourage folks that are interested in helping a campaign. The two things I say to folks all the time, the two things I need the most are people to make contributions, however big or small, and to spread the word. And if you can only do one of those things, especially if you're a social media big follower, spread the word. Because if you can't give me $5, but you have 10,000 followers, tell them, right, hey, let's join forces. That tends to work. The fact is, I'm not going to outraise Tom Cole. He takes money from anybody who'll give it to him. He has millions in the bank. He can, and if he runs out, he will make one phone call and get millions more. I'm not interested in outraising Tom Cole. What I'm interested in is keeping the lights on, having a credible campaign, paying a professional staff, so we can do the right things. I mean, the people don't. Maybe they do. Who uses snail mail anymore? The average American may not know it costs like $1.50 to send a campaign thing to your house. It costs me like $1.50 printing plus postage. And right, the science says you got to reach someone 5 times before they get the message. So now I got to spend 5 times $1.50 to get for one vote, and there's 800,000 people in my district. It's a small campaign, a small 5,000 voter outreach thing is near $100,000 effort, and I haven't raised $100,000 in 8 months. So sounds like a big whine. I'm not whining. I'm just saying that campaign,
no, it's the reality.
Campaign contributions matter. And if small dollar contributions didn't matter, the federal government, the administration wouldn't be attacking Act Blue right now. Right. Act Blue is the way is how I get my money. And they're attacking Act Blue because they want to shut off that stream. They want to make it harder for regular people to have a voice in politics. And that's all the evidence one needs to know, that if you have extra $5 to give it to the candidate of choice, even if it's not me, I have a primary opponent. If you like him better than me, give him money, because we need to win this race.
You know what? I love that, and I appreciate that. So before we wrap up, I want to ask you one more question. What is the feasibility of you winning in this, aside from the donations? Because I would imagine a lot of people are sick of the guy that's been there for 20 some odd years, right? What do you think is the feasibility of you winning this?
It's totally winnable. Now, I can't quantify it because it doesn't. I don't have money for polling anyway. So here's what I'll tell you. This is, by conventional wisdom, this is an R+17 district, which means it's going to go R+17, all else being equal. But all else isn't equal anymore. We have a national, the wind at our backs nationally. The mood is changing. The people are hurting. People are feeling across the state. And that R+17 math at least partially takes into account our history of voting in this district, and our voter turnout is dog shit in the state of Oklahoma, and nobody turns out to vote. That's partially because we keep nominating people who aren't serious candidates. So with all those things being different, that R+17 keeps getting smaller and smaller. So I'm an optimistic guy, but I don't think that makes this a D+ anything, but it is much closer than people think. Because Tom Cole's never faced an opponent with my biography, with my background and experience, and because he has over and over again used, like, I support veterans. Well, I'm a veteran. I'm a disabled veteran. I don't feel supported.
Right.
I saved Tinker Air Force Base. Well, I'm a pilot who spent 30 years in the Air Force. I can talk about Air Force bases with individual credibility. Oh, the Defense Industrial Base. You said I went to National Defense University. I'm an expert on the Defense Industrial Base. So he's been coasting. He has been coasting for a long time, and I think all those things combined to make this definitely a winnable race if I do a good job. And if we don't win, it's not because the Oklahomans are bad at choosing. I think if we don't win, it'll be because either I've done a bad job of getting the word out, or some black swan event happens that changes everything. But it's definitely winnable. And I'll tell one last story, and then I'll stop. I know he is paying attention to me because I got to meet him at when I filed and on April 1st, and I tried to shake his hand. He said, "I know who you are," and not in a very nice way. So he already knows who I am. More importantly, maybe is last week or the week before, his campaign Facebook blocked my wife and my daughter. So
wait, he didn't shake your hand?
He did. I reached out. He shook my hand, but as he shook my hand, he said, "I know who you are." It wasn't a pleasant. Like even if I don't like someone, even if I know someone's attacking me, politically, I would still say, "Oh, I've heard a lot about you. Nice to meet you. You're out there really."
Thanks for your service.
Yeah.
Like if you can't muster anything decent, you should say that. The audacity of him to do that.
Maybe I surprised him by just standing there because maybe he had never met one of his opponents before. But I think they're paying attention. We will know more after I win the primary, when the knives really come out. But I'm prepared for that, and I've prepared my kids for that. My kids are all grown, and what I've briefed them is, and my supporters that it'll probably get ugly, but they're under no obligation to come to my defense. They can don't take it personally. This is going to be how politics is, but if they can beat me up all they want, I have thick skin. You mentioned earlier about not wanting to be, or taking those attacks. I have a thick skin from in the fighter pilot training world. We hold ourselves to a really high standard of performance, so we debrief ourselves really hard. And so being told that I'm not doing a good job, or that I need to adjust something, or a speech, I should change my wording on a speech, or my mustache, or whatever feedback on things about my performance, I can live with. I'm ready for that, and it's not going to hurt my feelings a bit. The personal attacks will be different because I'm not often attacked personally, but as a commander at multiple levels, sometimes people don't like you, and when they got nothing on you on performance, they'll go for an attack on the person. So I'm prepared mentally for that. And if they want to, pick something to be mad about, or make up something to be mad about, I'm ready for that. It's worth it. I took an oath. I said I would do it. And if it was hard, if it was easy, everybody would do it. Right.
Well, and listen, your experience and your track record speaks for itself. You're a principal over circumstance. You've led an honorable life. You've led a life of service. You came from parents who led a life of service, which, by the way, I keep thinking about the fact that, your parents couldn't afford to send you to college, yet both of them sacrificed and served for our country. They should have been able to send their kid to college. You know what I mean? Right. The whole thing is a little broke. And that's not a slight on them. That's a slight on the military. You know what I mean? And I get that too. I was I had a team of doctors at Bethesda Naval most of my childhood because of the congenital birth defects I was born with because of my father's time in Vietnam. And as soon as I turned 18, they were like, cool. Don't let the door hit you on the way out. Right. And they could have done a lot of things to minimize my pain and stuff in the beginning, and they didn't. So, but neither here nor there. Aside from we need people to go make donations, I think getting younger people on your, getting on their radar, the people that are active on social media would be very beneficial. I kind of think maybe reaching out to some of those cannabis people might be beneficial because a lot of those have really big social media followings too. And a lot of cannabis consumers don't care about politics, but if you let them know that you're advocating for that, you might get some votes. So that's my 25 years of owning a multimedia company, I would knock on some of those doors. But what is the last thing that you would like to say to people listening? What's your biggest takeaway from today that you want them to know?
Yeah, thank you. So before we wrap up, thank you for having me on. This is really important, and it's going to help me. I know it. The biggest takeaway is whether or not you are in Oklahoma, this race, my race, matters to you, because Tom Cole sits atop the House Appropriations Committee. He just ask him, he will tell you. He's one of the most powerful people in Congress. Every day he's in Congress, no matter where you live in this country, you are adversely affected by his inaction or his actions. So this race matters to you, even if you don't live here in Oklahoma. And if I can get your support, then it goes a long way towards making a difference in the outcome of this race, and it is winnable. But if not, if there are a lot of folks out there who have important races in their area, if you do nothing else after watching this interview, know that we need people from all walks of life to get directly involved. I promise there is a county Democratic Party or some other civic organization in your town who has people that are advocates and out there who know what they're doing. The first step is the hardest, to get involved, and then suddenly they're like, hey, we're going to the Capitol. They're like, why are we going to the Capitol? Because we're going to go knock on doors of people in the State House and tell them that we don't like this H Bill 123. That's just something that people really do. And until you've been a part of that, you don't know how effective that can be. So I'd encourage people to get involved. And, if they're watching a political podcast, they're 40 minutes into this and still watching, or 59 minutes into this, if it goes unedited into this, and they're still watching, they're probably super involved. Great. You're involved. Go get somebody else involved. Find some young person, find someone who's at a coffee shop or, on your social media, and have a meeting, go to a meeting and get active, because we are not going to save this country by sitting on social media and tweeting about it. We have to get out there and get active, physically be present, and hold the feet to the fire of our elected officials, even those who agree with us, because, you can get weak in the knees when you see funding or other, your electability being threatened. So we need to hold them accountable, even those are on our side.
I love that. And when you said that, it made me realize something. There's a lot of fractured families out there, a lot of parents trying to relate to their kids. Get your kids involved. Create some social media content. Go volunteer. Like, if you don't understand TikTok, but your kid does, go volunteer for a campaign like Jeff's and use those skills. Show them how to do it, right? Like, bring something to the table. It could be a good family bonding experience and fight for our democracy at the same time, so... Jeff, thank you so much for being on the show today. I got lots of great clips from this. I don't think we're going to edit anything out, to be honest. I thought it was a great conversation. People like things like this. I've learned a lot about you. I really appreciate your honesty, your vulnerability, your humility. All of those things are really important in leadership, as you know. And I think a lot of people are going to resonate with that and have respect for you, because you have earned that respect through your career. But the way you present yourself is very likable and very real. I'm very normal, and I think that we need more of that, to be honest. I know we do. I know we do, right? So thank you for being on the show today. I'm going to get this edited really quick. We're going to get it out, and I'm going to really push to get people to make some donations, and we'll tag each other up on threads, and we'll do everything we can to get the word out, because there were some moments today that I think would really hook people, and especially what you said, we got to get that guy out of the Congress, because like you said, every day he's in there, the Appropriations Committee. I mean, he's making decisions that are impacting all of our lives, whether you live in Oklahoma or not, and that to me is like insanely important and a really big point to push home, and I think that'll resonate with a lot of people. Right now, when you call these offices, they always say, are you a constituent? And I get why they need to know that, but it also pisses me off, because whatever decision your boss makes impacts me too, dude. It doesn't matter if I live in your little podunk town or your big, what's always a podunk town, it's never a big city, right? So it's like, I get it, but at the same time, it does still matter. Like, your decisions still matter, whether you're in Oklahoma or wherever. So I think that's an important message to drive home, and one that we will definitely push on our end in the marketing of this episode, because it's an important thing to remember and to understand. So Thank you for making the decision and leaving the military and doing this, because I think a lot of us are watching what's going on and we're going, why isn't anybody doing anything? Why isn't anybody resigning? Why isn't any? And that's exactly what you did. You resigned and you picked up a jersey and you put yourself on the bench. And I freaking love that, man. I love that more than I can express. So thank you.
You're very kind. Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for tuning in to What Do We Do Next? I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I know I'm fired up to help Jeff in his campaign and do anything I can to get some donations and help him out. So if you're listening to this and you're in Oklahoma, hit him up. If you're listening to this and you're in the cannabis industry, you already know how important Oklahoma is. And I'm not trying to dwell on that, but I had a cannabis business for a minute, so I have a little inkling. I know how much money is in cannabis. I know how much money your investors are giving you. I know how much is going down. If you allocated a little bit of that towards Jeff's campaign, you would have an ally in leadership advocating for you because you understand how he feels. If you're young in Oklahoma, please volunteer. Or even if you're old, it doesn't matter. Volunteer with Jeff. Help him get his social media. If you know what to do and you know how to make it happen and you want to make some graphics and you're sitting at home doom scrolling and want something to do, this is a perfect way to channel that angst into something useful and beneficial. So on that note, thank you for tuning in. Please consider joining the Substack. I could really appreciate your support. Every dollar that goes to our Substack just goes back to paid ads to get this podcast. What we do is we run ads in Forbes, Business Week, Sports Illustrated, all kinds of different magazines. We run ads for the podcast so that it shows up in major mainstream publications, and that's what helps push a lot of downloads and visibility. Why am I doing this? So that guys like Jeff can get into office and we can start to right this ship. So if that resonates with you, please consider joining the Substack, reaching out. You could also support me by helping me with the Substack because, I don't know what I'm doing. I feel like an old lady. On that note, thank you all for tuning in. I appreciate all your support. And until the next time, be excellent to each other, and we'll see you real soon.